The blood on the eviction notice made Rebecca Kellerman's hands shake. Though whether from fear or rage, she could not say any more. Her late husband, Thomas, had been dead for 3 months, buried under the cottonwood tree on the hill overlooking their small ranch outside Genoa, Nevada, and the debt collectors seemed to multiply like locusts in his absence. The notice declared she had 2 weeks to settle $1,400 or lose everything. The ranch that had been in her family since her father first staked his claim in 1852, back when Nevada was still part of the Utah Territory. The blood was hers, from where she'd torn the paper from the nail driven into her door frame, catching her palm on the rough wood. She pressed her apron against the wound and stepped inside the small house, the afternoon sun streaming through windows that needed washing. Everything needed something these days. The roof leaked in the back bedroom, the barn door hung crooked on broken hinges, and half the fence posts had rotted through. Thomas had been good at many things, but managing money and maintaining the property had not been among his talents. He'd been a dreamer, always chasing the next big opportunity, investing in schemes that never paid off. The silver mine in Virginia City that collapsed before producing an ounce. The cattle drive to California where half the herd died crossing the Sierra Nevadas. The freight business that went bankrupt when the Central Pacific Railroad came through and made wagons obsolete. Rebecca was 24 years old and felt ancient. She had married Thomas when she was 19, full of hope and love and the certainty that together they could build something lasting. He'd been 26 then, handsome and confident, with a smile that made her believe anything was possible. 5 years later, she was alone with debts she had not incurred and a future that looked like nothing but darkness. The wound on her palm had stopped bleeding. She wrapped it with a clean strip of cloth and sat at the kitchen table, spreading the eviction notice flat against the scarred wood. The signature at the bottom belonged to Samuel Thorpe, who owned the bank in Genoa and half the businesses along the main street. He'd been patient at first, after Thomas died, offered his condolences, told her to take her time. Then the patience had run out, replaced by cold business sense. $1,400 in 2 weeks, or he'd auction the ranch to the highest bidder. She had $43 to her name. That evening, she rode into Genoa on her mare, a bay named Copper, who was probably the most valuable thing she still owned. The town sat in the shadow of the Sierra Nevada mountains, established back in 1851 as a trading station. Main Street stretched for 3 blocks, lined with false-fronted buildings that tried to project permanence in a land where everything felt temporary. The saloon, the general store, the bank, the hotel, the livery, the blacksmith. Everything a frontier town needed to separate miners and ranchers from their money. She tied Copper outside the bank and went inside, her best dress doing little to hide the fact that she was desperate. Samuel Thorpe sat behind his desk like a king on a throne, his substantial belly pressed against the edge, his mustache waxed to needle points. He looked up when she entered, and something that might have been pity crossed his face before being replaced by professional distance. "Mrs. Kellerman." "I was expecting you might visit, Mr. Thorpe. I received your notice." "I'm sorry about that. Truly I am, but business is business and the bank has its own obligations." She sat in the chair across from him without being invited. Her legs felt weak. "Is there any way to extend the deadline?" "I could sell some livestock, maybe find work in town." Thorpe shook his head. "You've got 3 milk cows and a dozen chickens. Even if you sold them all, you'd barely raise $100. As for work, every business in town is already fully staffed. These are hard times, Mrs. Kellerman." "Hard times for everyone." "Then what am I supposed to do?" He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. You could marry again. A young woman like yourself, not hard to look at, good cook from what I hear. Plenty of men would take you on, debt and all." The suggestion made her stomach turn. "I have been a widow for 3 months. I know it seems soon, but practical concerns must take precedence over sentiment. This is the frontier, not Boston. People do what they must to survive." She stood, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I will find a way to pay. Give me the 2 weeks in your notice." "The 2 weeks stand. After that, the ranch goes to auction." His voice softened slightly. "I'm not a cruel man, Mrs. Kellerman. I'm giving you fair warning and a fair chance. That's more than many would offer." She left without another word, stepping into the evening air that smelled of pine and dust. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Copper nickered softly when Rebecca untied her, as if sensing her mistress's distress. The ride back to the ranch took an hour, the road winding through scrub brush and scattered juniper trees. Darkness had fallen by the time she reached home, the house a black silhouette against the starlit sky. She unsaddled Copper and brushed her down, taking comfort in the familiar routine. The barn smelled of hay and horse and the particular mustiness of old wood. She gave Copper some oats and made sure the water trough was full before heading to the house. Sleep did not come easily that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind rattle the loose shingles on the roof. Thomas's side of the bed remained empty, the sheets cold. Sometimes she still reached out in the dark, forgetting for a moment that he was gone. Then reality would crash back and the loneliness would be suffocating. The next morning, she woke before dawn and threw herself into work. If she was going to lose everything, she would not go down without a fight. She spent the morning repairing fence posts, digging out the rotted wood and setting new posts in their place. The work was back-breaking, each post hole requiring her to break through rocky soil with a spade and crowbar. Blisters formed on her hands despite the gloves she wore. By midday, she had replaced 4 posts and felt like she had accomplished nothing. She broke for lunch, eating cold beans and bread at the kitchen table. Through the window, she could see the cottonwood tree on the hill, Thomas's grave marked by a simple wooden cross she had fashioned herself. She had not visited in a week, could not bear to stand there and pour out her grief and anger to someone who could not answer. That afternoon, while she was hauling water from the well to the vegetable garden, she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Her first instinct was fear. Women alone on isolated ranches were vulnerable, and everyone knew she was a widow. She set down the water buckets and went to the house, retrieving the rifle Thomas had kept over the fireplace. She had only fired it a handful of times but knew which end to point away from herself. A single rider appeared on the road, leading a pack mule behind him. Even from a distance, she could tell he was tall, sitting easy in the saddle like someone who had spent most of his life on horseback. He wore a dark hat pulled low against the sun, a dusty trail coat, and carried himself with a casual confidence that suggested he could handle himself in a fight. Rebecca stepped onto the porch, holding the rifle across her body in a way that was meant to be visible but not overtly threatening. The rider approached slowly, raising one hand in a gesture of peace when he was close enough to see the weapon. "Afternoon, madam," he called out. His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "I'm looking for the Kellerman ranch. Would this be it?" "It would," Rebecca answered, not lowering the rifle. "State your business." He reined in his horse about 20 feet from the porch, far enough to be respectful but close enough to talk without shouting. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, probably not more than 30. His face was tanned and weathered, with a strong jaw darkened by several days of stubble. His eyes were a striking blue-gray, the kind that seemed to see more than they should. Name's Zachary Holbrook. I knew your husband, madam, heard about his passing and wanted to pay my respects. Rebecca's grip on the rifle loosened slightly. You knew Thomas. Met him about 2 years back, up in Virginia City. He helped me out of a tight spot with some claim jumpers who thought they could take what wasn't theirs. I told him if he ever needed anything, all he had to do was ask. Zachary removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. I was working a ranch up near Reno and only just heard he'd passed. I'm sorry for your loss. She lowered the rifle completely, something in his manner putting her at ease. There was a directness to him, an honesty that seemed rare in her experience. That's kind of you to come all this way. Thomas never mentioned you. No reason he would have. We only spent a few days together, but a debt is a debt, even if the man it's owed to is gone. He glanced around the property, taking in the sagging barn door, the broken fence posts, the general air of disrepair. Looks like you could use a hand with some things. Pride warred with practicality in Rebecca's chest. She needed help desperately, but accepting charity from a stranger felt wrong. I manage. I'm sure you do, madam, but managing and thriving are two different things. He gestured to the barn. That door's going to fall off completely if someone doesn't fix it soon, and those fence posts won't last through winter. I have been working on the fence. I can see that. You're doing good work. He swung down from his horse with the fluid grace of someone who had done it 10,000 times. But 2 hands are better than 1, and I've got nothing but time. Let me help for a few days. Pay back what I owe your husband. Rebecca studied him, trying to gauge his intentions. He stood relaxed, one hand holding his horse's reins, the other hanging loose at his side. He wore a revolver on his hip, the leather holster worn from use, but he made no move toward it. His eyes met hers directly, no shifting or evasiveness. I cannot pay you, she said finally. Did not ask you to, I'm offering freely. Why? Because your husband helped me when he did not have to. Because a debt is a debt. Because it's the right thing to do. He put his hat back on. And because it looks like you could use a friend, Mrs. Kellerman. The last part broke something inside her, some wall she had built to keep the world at bay. She had not realized how lonely she had been until someone offered simple kindness without expecting anything in return. I would be grateful for your help, Mr. Holbrook. Zachary, please. Mr. Holbrook was my father. Then you may call me Rebecca. He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to something approaching beautiful. Rebecca it is. Now, if you'll show me where I can put up my horse and gear, I'll get started on that barn door before the day gets any older. She showed him to the barn, where there was space for his horse in one of the empty stalls. They had once kept 6 horses, but Thomas had sold them off one by one to pay debts. Now, there was only copper and room for ghosts. Zachary unsaddled his horse, a large roan gelding he called Red, and brushed him down with the same care Rebecca had shown Copper. Then he unloaded his pack mule, revealing tools and supplies that suggested he had been living rough for some time. You travel prepared, Rebecca observed. Habit from years of drifting. Never know when you'll need a hammer or some rope. He pulled off his coat and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle. Now, let's take a look at this door. Rebecca watched as he examined the hinges, testing the weight and checking the frame. He worked with the efficiency of someone who knew his trade. No wasted motion or unnecessary talk. Within an hour, he had removed the old hinges, replaced them with new ones from his supplies, and rehung the door so it swung true and smooth. That should hold for a good long while, he said, testing it one more time. What else needs attention? They spent the rest of the afternoon working together. He finished the fence post she had started, making quick work of what would have taken her days. She cooked dinner while he worked, making a stew from salt pork and vegetables from the garden. It felt strange to be cooking for someone other than herself, to set two places at the table instead of one. When she called him in for dinner, he washed up at the pump outside and came to the door, hesitating at the threshold. "Would not be proper for me to come inside, madam. I'll take my meal in the barn if that's all right." "Do not be ridiculous. You have been working all afternoon." "The least I can do is feed you at a proper table." He still looked uncertain. "People talk in small towns. People can mind their own business. Come inside, Zachary. It's just dinner." He followed her into the house, removing his hat and hanging it on the peg by the door. She watched him take in the small front room with its worn furniture and faded curtains, the kitchen beyond with its cast iron stove and hand-pump sink. It was not much, but it was hers, or at least it had been until Samuel Thorpe's notice. They ate in companionable silence at first, both too hungry and tired for much conversation. The stew was simple but hot and filling, and Rebecca had managed to bake bread that morning before starting on the fence posts. Zachary ate like a man who had missed too many meals, cleaning his plate and accepting seconds when she offered. "This is fine cooking," he said. "Best meal I have had in months." "Trail food gets tiresome, I imagine." "That it does. Beans and bacon can only take you so far." He sopped up the last of his stew with a piece of bread. "You have a good setup here. Nice land, plenty of water. Be ashamed to lose it." Rebecca's hand froze halfway to her mouth. "What makes you think I'm losing it?" He looked uncomfortable. "Saw the notice on your door when I rode up." "Could not help but see it." She set down her spoon, appetite gone. "I see. That's why you're doing all this work yourself, isn't it? Trying to get the place in shape to sell or hold on to." It was not a question. There seemed little point in denying it. Thomas left debts, substantial debts. "The bank is calling them due." "How much time do you have?" "Less than 2 weeks now." Zachary was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on his plate. When he looked up, his expression was thoughtful. "How much do you owe?" $1,400. "I have 43. He whistled low. "That's a considerable sum." Thomas was always certain the next opportunity would be the one that paid off. It never was. She heard the bitterness in her own voice and hated it. "I should not speak ill of him. He's gone. Being dead does not make a man's mistakes disappear." "Sounds like he left you in a difficult position." "He did not mean to. He loved me in his way. Love should not leave you broke and desperate." Zachary stood and carried his plate to the sink. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Tomorrow we'll see what else we can fix up. Maybe if the place looks good, you could sell some of the land, keep the house and a few acres. The bank will auction everything if I do not pay in full. Then we'll have to figure something else out." He headed for the door, then paused. "Mind if I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did not any of your neighbors come to help?" Small communities usually pull together when someone's in trouble. Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself. "I have not exactly advertised my situation. Pride, I suppose, and Thomas did not make many friends. He borrowed from too many people, made too many promises he could not keep. I think folks are content to let me fail. That's a hard thing. It's an honest thing. I cannot blame them." Zachary put his hat back on. "Well, you have got help now for what it's worth. We'll figure something out." After he left, Rebecca cleaned up the dinner dishes and prepared for bed. Through the window, she could see lamplight in the barn where Zachary had set up for the night. The sight of it was comforting somehow, knowing she was not completely alone. She tried not to think about what would happen when the 2 weeks were up, when Zachary would presumably move on, and she would lose everything her family had built. The next few days fell into a pattern. They worked together from sunrise to sunset, tackling the endless list of repairs the ranch needed. Zachary proved to be skilled at seemingly everything. He patched the leaking roof, fixed the pump that had been sputtering, reinforced the chicken coop against predators, and started clearing the irrigation ditches that fed the vegetable garden. Rebecca worked alongside him, holding boards while he hammered, mixing mortar while he laid stone, learning skills her father should have taught her but never had. They talked while they worked, small conversations that gradually revealed more about each other. Zachary had been born in Texas, she learned, but left home at 16 after his father died, and his mother remarried a man who made it clear stepchildren were not welcome. He'd worked cattle drives, breaking horses, mining, railroad construction, anything that paid. He'd saved money with the goal of buying his own ranch someday, but always ended up helping someone else or losing it to circumstances beyond his control. "I'm not good at holding on to things," he admitted one afternoon while they were fixing the corral fence. "Money, property, even people. They all seem to slip through my fingers." "That does not sound like a choice," Rebecca said. "Maybe not. But at some point you have to wonder if you are the common factor in your own failures." She understood that feeling intimately. Thomas used to say that luck was like the weather. Sometimes it's good, sometimes bad, but you cannot control it. Your husband sounds like he was an optimist. He was, right up until the end. She drove a nail into the fence post with more force than necessary. "The doctor said it was his heart, just stopped in his sleep." I woke up next to him and he was already cold. Zachary's hand covered hers on the hammer. "That's a terrible thing to go through alone." "I was not alone. He was right there." She pulled her hand away, uncomfortable with the warmth of his touch. But he might as well have been a stranger for all the good it did. They did not talk much for the rest of the afternoon, but the silence was not uncomfortable. Rebecca found herself watching Zachary when he was not looking, noticing the way he moved with unconscious grace, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the rare smile that appeared when something amused him. He was handsome, she admitted to herself, but more than that, he was solid. Dependable. Everything Thomas had not been. The guilt that followed that thought was crushing. On the 5th day, Zachary rode into Genoa to buy supplies they needed for the remaining repairs. Rebecca gave him a list and some of her precious remaining money, though he tried to refuse it. "I am not a charity case," she insisted. "Never said you were, but I have money saved. Save it for your own ranch. I will pay for my own supplies." He accepted the money with visible reluctance. "I'll be back before dark." Alone for the first time in days, Rebecca found the silence oppressive. She had gotten used to having Zachary around, his steady presence and quiet competence. The house felt empty without him, even though he had never been inside except for meals. She forced herself to focus on work, spending the afternoon in the garden, pulling weeds and harvesting vegetables that were ready. The physical labor helped quiet her mind, at least temporarily. Zachary returned as promised, but his expression was troubled. He unloaded the supplies from his pack mule without his usual efficiency, movements jerky and distracted. "What's wrong?" Rebecca asked. "Nothing. Got everything on the list, Zachary," he sighed and turned to face her. "I heard talk in town about you, about us." Her stomach nodded. "What kind of talk?" "The kind you'd expect. A young widow and a strange man living on her property. People are saying you've already replaced your husband, that you're not respecting his memory." He looked angry, not at her but at the situation. "I'm sorry. I should have thought about how this would look. I do not care what people think. Maybe you should. This is a small town. Your reputation matters, especially if you are hoping to rebuild your life here." Rebecca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Rebuild? In less than 10 days, I will have no life here to rebuild. The bank will take everything, and I will be forced to move somewhere and start over with nothing. My reputation is the least of my concerns. There has to be a way to raise the money. There is not. I have explored every option. I could sell everything I own and still not come close to $1,400. Zachary was quiet for a long moment, staring at the mountains in the distance. When he spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. What if someone paid the debt for you? No one in this world is going to give me $1,400. What if they did? What if someone settled the debt and asked nothing in return? It took a moment for his meaning to register. When it did, Rebecca felt like she had been punched. No, absolutely not. Why not? Because I cannot accept that kind of money from you or anyone else. It would not be right. Why not? I have the money I've been saving for years. What good is it doing sitting in a bank in Reno? That's your future, your ranch. I'll save again, but you need help now. He stepped closer, his expression earnest. Let me do this, Rebecca. Let me pay the debt. I would never be able to repay you. I am not asking you to. I'm offering it freely, the same way I offered to fix your barn door. $1,400 is not the same as a barn door. The principle is the same. You need help. I can provide it. Everything else is just details. Rebecca shook her head, overwhelmed. Why would you do this? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you are a good person in a bad situation through no fault of your own. I know you work harder than most men I have met. I know you deserve better than to lose everything because your husband made poor choices. He paused. And I know what it's like to have nothing and no one. If I can spare you that, then my money is well spent. She wanted to say yes. God, how she wanted to say yes. The relief of having the debt settled, of keeping her home, was almost intoxicating. But accepting such a massive gift from a man she had known for less than a week felt wrong on every level. People will say I'm taking advantage of you. They'll say worse things about me than they already are. People will always talk. That does not mean you have to listen. Zachary, I cannot, can or won't. Both, neither, I don't know. She pressed her hands to her face, feeling the weight of impossible choices. This is too much. He reached out slowly, as if afraid she might bolt, and gently pulled her hands away from her face. His hands were warm and calloused, workman's hands that had built and fixed and created. Listen to me. I am going to go into town tomorrow and pay your debt at the bank. You do not have to accept it as a gift if that troubles you. Consider it a loan, to be repaid whenever you are able. No interest, no deadline. Just one person helping another. That's the same as a gift. Then let it be a gift. Let someone do something kind for you without worrying about the cost or the consequences. His thumbs brushed across her knuckles. You deserve kindness, Rebecca. The tears she had been holding back for weeks finally broke free. She tried to turn away, embarrassed, but Zachary pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her in a gesture that was both foreign and desperately needed. She had not been held since Thomas died, had not realized how much she needed simple human comfort until it was offered. She buried her face against his chest and sobbed, all the fear and grief and loneliness pouring out. He held her through it all, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring wordless sounds of comfort. He smelled of wood smoke and horses and honest sweat, familiar frontier scents that somehow made her feel safe. When the storm finally passed, she pulled back, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. I apologize. I did not mean to fall apart like that. Nothing to apologize for. You have been carrying a heavy load for a long time. Sometimes we all need to set it down for a moment. She looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to speak. If you truly mean this, if you really want to help, I will accept. But only as a loan. I will pay you back every cent, even if it takes me the rest of my life. Whatever makes you comfortable, he smiled. Though I hope it does not take quite that long, I would like to see you happy before we are both old and gray. That night, Rebecca lay in bed and thought about Zachary in the barn, surrounded by hay and horses, sleeping on a bedroll when he had just offered her $1,400. It made no sense. Men did not do things like that without expecting something in return, except apparently this one did. She wanted to believe his motives were pure, but years of living in the world had taught her to be suspicious of generosity. The next morning, Zachary was up before dawn, feeding the animals and preparing for the ride into town. Rebecca made breakfast and packed him food for the journey, unable to shake the surreal feeling that this was actually happening. $1,400. Her entire future, bought with money saved by a drifting cowboy who owed her nothing. "Are you certain about this?" she asked as he saddled Red. "I am certain. You could buy your own ranch with that money, start the life you have been saving for. I'll save again. But land will always be there. You will not be." He swung up into the saddle. "I should be back by early afternoon. Try not to worry yourself into knots while I am gone." "That's like telling the sun not to rise," he grinned. "Fair point. Worry if you must, but know that everything will be fine." She watched him ride away, her emotions a tangled mess of hope and fear, and something else she did not want to examine too closely. If this worked, if Zachary truly settled her debt, she would owe him more than money. She would owe him her entire future, and that was a debt she had no idea how to repay. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Rebecca threw herself into work, scrubbing the house from top to bottom, washing curtains and windows, beating rugs. Anything to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. But no amount of cleaning could distract her from the fact that her fate was being decided in a bank in Genoa by a man she had known for less than a week. It was mid-afternoon when she heard hoofbeats. She dropped the broom she had been using and ran to the door, her heart pounding. Zachary was riding up the path, and even from a distance she could see he was smiling. Behind him rode a second horse, and it took her a moment to recognize Samuel Thorpe's substantial form. She met them in the yard, anxiety clawing at her stomach. Zachary dismounted and came to stand beside her, a gesture of solidarity that did not go unnoticed. Thorpe took longer to dismount, his movements stiff and ungainly. "Mrs. Kellerman," Thorpe said, pulling an envelope from his coat pocket. "I wanted to deliver this personally." He handed her the envelope. Inside was the eviction notice stamped across with red ink that read "Paid in full." "Your debt has been settled. The ranch is yours, free and clear." Rebecca stared at the paper, unable to process what she was seeing. "It's really settled, all of it, every cent." Mr. Holbrook here presented himself at the bank this morning with $1,400 in cash. Most unusual, but perfectly legal. Thorpe looked between them with an expression that was hard to read. "You have made a powerful friend, Mrs. Kellerman." "I have been fortunate," she managed. "Indeed. Well, I will leave you to your celebrations. Good day." Thorpe remounted with difficulty and rode back toward town, leaving them alone. The moment he was out of sight, Rebecca's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, still clutching the paid notice. "You really did it. You actually paid the debt. I said I would." Zachary crouched beside her. "Are you all right?" "I do not know. I feel strange. Like I'm going to wake up any moment and find this was all a dream. It's real. You are safe. The ranch is yours." She looked at him, this virtual stranger who had just changed her entire life. "Why? Please, Zachary, I need to understand why you would do this." He sat in the dirt beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "The truth. When I first heard about Thomas dying and leaving you in debt, I thought I would ride out, help fix a few things, and move on. Pay my respects, settle my obligation to your husband, and that would be that. He picked up a handful of dirt and let it sift through his fingers. But then I met you. Saw how hard you were fighting, how much strength it took to just keep going. And I remembered what it felt like to be alone and desperate, and I thought, if I can help, really help, why would not I? $1,400 is more than help. It's a fortune. It's money. Important, sure, but just money. What you have here, this land, this home, it's more than that. It's roots. It's belonging. I have never had that, probably never will. But if I can preserve it for someone else, then maybe that's enough. Rebecca set the paper aside and turned to face him fully. You could have roots. You could have your own ranch, your own home. Why throw that away for me? I am not throwing it away. I am investing it in something that matters. His eyes met hers, and there was something in them that made her breath catch. I'm investing it in you. The weight of those words hung in the air between them. Rebecca knew she should say something, but her throat had closed up. She was aware of how close they were sitting, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his blue-gray eyes, close enough to smell the soap he had used that morning. Her heart was beating too fast, and she told herself it was just relief about the debt, just gratitude, nothing more. But she knew she was lying to herself. I should start dinner, she said, standing abruptly. You must be hungry after the ride to town and back. If Zachary was disappointed by her retreat, he did not show it. I could eat, want help with anything. No, I mean no thank you, I can manage. She hurried toward the house, needing distance and time to process everything that had happened. That night, they ate dinner in a silence that was less comfortable than usual. Rebecca kept catching Zachary watching her with an expression she could not decipher. She focused on her food, on cleaning up afterward, on anything but the way her stomach fluttered when their hands accidentally touched reaching for the water pitcher at the same time. After dinner, Zachary lingered at the table instead of heading straight to the barn. Can I ask you something? Of course. What are you going to do now that the ranch is secure? Rebecca had been so focused on saving the ranch that she had not thought much about what came after. I suppose I will continue working it, try to rebuild, maybe buy some more livestock, make it profitable again. That's good, that's practical. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Will you stay here, in Genoa? Where else would I go? This is my home. I just thought with the way people talk it might be difficult. People have always talked. I learned to ignore it a long time ago. She paused. What about you? What will you do now? The question seemed to catch him off guard. I had not thought that far ahead. You must have plans, places to go, work to find. Nothing specific. I'm a drifter, remember, I go where the work is. Will you stay? The words came out before she could stop them, and she immediately regretted them. I mean, there's still work to be done here, and I could use the help, and I should start repaying you, so if you stayed, I could pay you wages, not much but something, and… Rebecca. He said her name softly, and she stopped babbling. Do you want me to stay? I do, if you want to, no obligation. His smile was like the sun coming out. I want to, for as long as you'll have me. Relief washed through her, so intense it was almost painful. Good, that's good. The days that followed were some of the happiest Rebecca could remember. With the debt settled and the immediate threat gone, she could breathe again. She and Zachary fell into an easy partnership, working the ranch together during the day, sharing meals and quiet conversation in the evenings. He continued sleeping in the barn, despite her growing conviction that worrying about propriety was foolish when he had already sacrificed so much for her. They talked more freely now, sharing stories from their pasts. Zachary told her about riding cattle drives through Texas, about a winter spent trapping in the Montana Territory, about a riverboat gambler who taught him poker during a rainy week in St. Louis. Rebecca shared her own more modest adventures, growing up on the ranch, her courtship with Thomas, her dreams of travel she had never pursued. "Where would you go?" Zachary asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "If you could go anywhere." "San Francisco," she said immediately. "I have always wanted to see the ocean. It's something the first time you see it, all that water stretching to the horizon, makes you feel small and infinite at the same time. You have been, once, years ago. Worked on the docks for a few months, loading freight. Hard work but good pay. What made you leave?" "Same thing that always makes me leave. Got restless, wanted to see what was over the next hill." He glanced at her. "I am not restless now, though. No, no. I feel like I could stay here forever and never get bored." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Rebecca's pulse quickened. "The ranch does have a way of keeping you busy." "I was not talking about the ranch." She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face stole her breath. There was no mistaking the intent in his eyes, the longing. She saw her own feelings reflected back at her, the growing attraction that had been building since the first day he arrived. It terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Zachary," she started, but he held up a hand. "I know it's too soon. I know you are still grieving your husband. I am not trying to rush you or push you into anything." He stood, putting distance between them. "But I need you to know how I feel. I care about you, Rebecca. More than I should, probably more than is wise. And if you never feel the same way, I'll accept that and stay your friend. But I could not keep pretending I only see you as someone I'm helping." Rebecca's mind raced. She should tell him it was too soon, that she needed time, that her husband had been dead for only a few months. But the truth was, she had not felt this way about Thomas even when they were courting. What she felt for Zachary was different, deeper, rooted in mutual respect and understanding rather than youthful infatuation. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of what I feel for you, scared of what it means." "What do you feel?" She stood and went to him, placing her hand over his heart. She could feel it beating fast beneath her palm, keeping time with her own. "I feel like I have been asleep and you woke me up. I feel like I can breathe again. I feel like I want you to stay forever, not as a hired hand or a friend, but as something more." His hand covered hers. "Rebecca, but I am terrified that I am making another mistake, that I am rushing into something because I am desperate and lonely and grateful. I do not want to use you or hurt you. You are not using me, and I am willing to risk getting hurt." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We will take this as slow as you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people seeing where this goes." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. He pulled her into his arms, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in the gathering darkness, neither speaking because words felt inadequate to the moment. That night, Rebecca lay in bed and finally allowed herself to feel hopeful about the future. The ranch was secure. She had money in the bank from selling some vegetables in town, and there was a man in her barn who looked at her like she hung the moon. It was more than she had dared dream of just 2 weeks ago. Over the following weeks, Rebecca and Zachary's relationship deepened. They were careful about public displays, aware that the town was already gossiping, but in private, they grew closer. He kissed her for the first time while they were hauling water from the well, a quick press of lips that left her blushing and wanting more. She initiated the second kiss a few days later, standing on her toes to reach him while they were mending fence. That one lasted longer, his hands cupping her face, her fingers tangling in his hair. "We should slow down," he murmured against her lips. "Should we?" She kissed him again. "People will talk. People already talk. Let them." She pulled back enough to look at him. "I know what I want, Zachary, and I want you. I want you too, but I want to do this right. Court you properly, give you time to be sure. His consideration only made her love him more, though she was not ready to say those words yet. Then court me properly. Take me to the harvest dance next month. Let everyone in town see that I have moved on. They will say you did not mourn long enough. Thomas has been gone for 5 months. How long is long enough? A year, 2, the rest of my life, she shook her head. I mourned, I grieved, but I am still alive and I deserve happiness. We both do. He kissed her forehead. Then I will take you to the harvest dance and we will let them talk. The dance was held in the largest barn in Genoa, decorated with lanterns and autumn leaves. It seemed like the entire town turned out, ranchers and merchants and miners, all dressed in their best clothes. Rebecca wore a blue dress she had not worn since before Thomas died, and Zachary had gotten a haircut and shaved, revealing the full handsome lines of his face. They entered together and the reaction was immediate. Conversations paused mid-sentence, heads turned, whispers spread. Rebecca felt herself tense, but Zachary's hand at the small of her back kept her steady. "Ignore them," he murmured. "You look beautiful and they are just jealous." The music started, a lively fiddle tune, and Zachary led her onto the dance floor. He was a surprisingly good dancer, guiding her through the steps with confidence. Other couples joined them, and gradually the attention shifted away as people got caught up in their own enjoyment. During a break in the music, Samuel Thorpe approached them. Rebecca braced herself for disapproval, but the banker's expression was almost friendly. "Mrs. Kellerman, Mr. Holbrook, good to see you both." "Mr. Thorpe," Rebecca replied cautiously. "I wanted to say the town is glad to see you getting back on your feet. Your ranch is looking much better these days. Been good for the area, having someone working that land properly again." "Thank you. Zachary has been a tremendous help," Thorpe nodded. "I can see that. You have got a good man there. Be ashamed to lose him." He clapped Zachary on the shoulder and moved on, leaving Rebecca slightly stunned. "Did Samuel Thorpe just give us his blessing?" she asked. "Seems like it. Maybe people are not as judgmental as we feared. Or maybe they just respect a man who pays his debts." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of dancing and socializing. Several people approached to welcome Rebecca back into the community, and if some of their looks were speculative, at least no one was openly hostile. By the time they rode home under a moon so bright it cast shadows, Rebecca felt lighter than she had in months. "That went better than expected," she said as Zachary helped her down from her horse. "It did, though I still heard plenty of whispers. Let them whisper. I know the truth and so do you, that's what matters." He walked her to the porch and they stood in the moonlight, neither wanting the evening to end. "Rebecca, I have been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About the future." He took her hands in his. "I know it has not been long and I do not want to rush you, but I need to know if this is real for you or if I'm just a convenient solution to your problems." The question stung, even though she understood why he asked it. "You think I am with you because you paid my debt, are you?" "No." She said it firmly, without hesitation. "If you had not paid the debt, if I had lost everything and ended up with nothing, I would still want you. You are not a convenience, Zachary. You are the best thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember." Relief flooded his face. "I needed to hear that. Because I am falling in love with you, Rebecca, and I need to know I am not alone in that." Her breath caught. "You love me." "I do. Have for weeks now, probably since the first day I met you and you pointed that rifle at me like you knew how to use it." She laughed, tears pricking her eyes. "I did not know how to use it. I would have probably shot myself in the foot. That just makes it more impressive." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I love you. You do not have to say it back, but I needed you to know." "I love you too." The words came easily, naturally, feeling right in a way nothing had in a long time. I think I have loved you since you offered to fix my barn door without asking for anything in return." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. Rebecca melted into it, her arms wrapping around his neck, standing on her toes to get closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. She pulled back to look at him. "What? Marry me?" "I know it's fast, I know people will talk, but I do not care. I love you and I want to build a life with you. This ranch, this home, let's make it ours together." "Zachary, we have only known each other for 2 months. I've known you long enough to be certain. But if you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as you need." Rebecca thought about her marriage to Thomas, built on youthful passion and optimism that had faded into disappointment and debt. What she had with Zachary was different. It was built on mutual respect, shared work, honest communication. It was built on friendship that had grown into love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you need more time, or yes, you will marry me." "Yes, I will marry you. I do not need more time. I know what I want and I want you." His whoop of joy startled the horses in the barn. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. "We should tell people," she said when they came up for air. "Make it official. Tomorrow, tonight, it's just us." He took her hand and led her to sit on the porch steps. "Tell me everything you want. What kind of wedding, what kind of life? Tell me your dreams." They sat there for hours talking about the future. A small wedding, just a few friends and the preacher. Expanding the ranch, buying more cattle, maybe some sheep. Children if they were blessed. A trip to San Francisco so Rebecca could see the ocean. Growing old together on the land they both loved. "It sounds perfect," Rebecca said, leaning against his shoulder. "It will be. I promise you I will spend every day of my life making you happy. You already do." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Genoa. Rebecca wore a simple cream-colored dress, and Zachary wore his best suit. Samuel Thorpe attended, along with several neighbors who had slowly warmed to the couple. It was not a large gathering, but it was warm and genuine, filled with people who wished them well. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary kissed her with such tenderness that Rebecca felt tears slip down her cheeks. This was nothing like her first wedding, which had been large and elaborate and ultimately hollow. This was real. This was right. They held a small reception at the ranch, tables set up in the yard laden with food that neighbors had contributed. Music played, people danced, and Rebecca felt truly part of the community for the first time since Thomas died. Maybe for the first time ever. As evening fell and guests began to depart, Zachary found her watching the sun set from their favorite spot on the porch. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "Happy, Mrs. Holbrook," she smiled at the new name. "Very happy. You." "Happiest day of my life." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I am looking forward to tonight." She turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. "Are you now?" "I am. Got a few ideas about how to celebrate properly." "Do you? Maybe you should show me." He grinned and scooped her up, carrying her into the house amid her laughter. The door closed behind them, shutting out the world, leaving just the two of them to begin their life together. The first year of marriage was full of hard work and harder lessons. They expanded the ranch slowly, buying cattle with money Zachary had saved and profits from selling their crops. Rebecca proved to have a head for business that Thomas had never possessed, negotiating good prices and making smart investments. Zachary handled most of the physical labor, though Rebecca worked alongside him whenever possible. They faced challenges. A harsh winter that killed several head of cattle, a drought that threatened the crops, a dispute with a neighbor over water rights that nearly turned violent before Zachary diffused it with his calm reason. But through it all, they had each other. On the hardest days, they would sit together in the evening, exhausted and discouraged, and remind each other why they were fighting so hard. "For us," Zachary would say, "for the life we are building." And it was enough. In the spring of their second year together, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She had never been pregnant during her marriage to Thomas, had wondered if she was unable to have children. But the doctor confirmed it, and suddenly, their future expanded to include a child. Zachary was overjoyed and instantly protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work. Rebecca tolerated it for a few days before putting her foot down. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. I can still work." "I know, but I worry. What if something happens? What if something always happens? We cannot live in fear." She took his face in her hands. "I promise to be careful. But I need you to trust that I know my limits." He did, reluctantly, though he still fussed more than she liked. As her belly grew, so did their excitement. They prepared a room for the baby, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from wood Zachary had been saving. Rebecca sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were. The baby came in early autumn after a long and difficult labor. Rebecca clung to Zachary's hand through it all, drawing strength from his presence. When the doctor finally placed their son in her arms, she wept with relief and overwhelming love. "He's perfect," Zachary whispered, staring at the tiny face with wonder. "You are perfect, both of you." They named him Thomas Zachary Holbrook, honoring the past while embracing the future. Little Thomas had his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's dark hair, and from the first, he had a personality that demanded attention. He was loud and hungry and kept them up most nights, but neither parent minded. He was theirs, this small, perfect person, and they loved him with a fierceness that was almost frightening. Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Zachary hired a few ranch hands to help with the growing herd, and Rebecca took on the bookkeeping and correspondence. Little Thomas grew quickly, learning to walk and talk and get into everything. He followed his father around the ranch like a shadow, and Zachary taught him about horses and cattle with infinite patience. When Thomas was 3, Rebecca gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Caroline Ruth. She was quieter than her brother, content to observe the world with wide hazel eyes. Zachary doted on her shamelessly, and Rebecca often found them together in the rocking chair, him singing old trail songs while Caroline gazed up at him adoringly. "You are going to spoil her," Rebecca teased. "That is my right as her father. Let me spoil her while she is still small enough to let me." More years passed, each one building on the last. The ranch expanded until it was one of the most successful in the area. They built a new house, larger and sturdier, though they kept the old one for sentimental reasons. Little Thomas grew into a serious boy who loved learning and talked about becoming a lawyer someday. Caroline was gentle and artistic, always drawing or singing. Through it all, Rebecca and Zachary's love deepened. They knew each other's rhythms, could communicate with a glance, supported each other through every challenge. On their 10th anniversary, they took the trip to San Francisco they had planned years ago, leaving the children with a trusted neighbor. Standing on the beach, watching the waves roll in, Rebecca thought about how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your savings for me," Zachary pulled her close, kissing her temple. "Never, not once. You and the children, this life we have built, it's worth more than all the money in the world. I paid you back, eventually. I know, but I never wanted you to. That money was always meant to be a gift, I know. But it mattered to me to repay it, to prove I could. You never had to prove anything to me. I believed in you from the start." She turned to face him, the ocean wind whipping her hair around her face. "I love you. I do not say it enough, but I do. You saved me, Zachary, not just from debt, but from drowning. You saved yourself. I just gave you a little help staying afloat. We saved each other then. That sounds about right." They stayed in San Francisco for a week, exploring the city and enjoying time alone together. But as wonderful as the trip was, they were both eager to get home to their children and their ranch. That was what they had built together, not just property and buildings, but a home filled with love. More years flowed by like water. The children grew, Thomas attending university to study law as he'd always planned, Caroline marrying a good man who owned a neighboring ranch. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with noise and laughter. The ranch continued to thrive, now run with the help of hired managers since Zachary and Rebecca were no longer young. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their movements slower. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by decades of partnership and mutual respect. They sat on the porch in the evenings, the same porch where Zachary had first told her he loved her, and watched the sun set behind the mountains. "You remember the first day we met?" Rebecca asked one evening. They were both in their 60s now, still healthy but aware of their mortality in a way young people never are. "I remember you pointing a rifle at me and looking like you might actually use it. I had no idea how to shoot that thing. I figured that out eventually." He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Best day of my life meeting you, even better than our wedding day. That was the second best day. But meeting you, that's when everything changed, when my life actually started." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so scared when you offered to pay my debt. Scared to accept, scared of what it meant, scared of feeling grateful and mistaking it for love. But it was love is love. Yes, it was from almost the beginning. I just was not ready to admit it yet." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. The ranch spread out before them, acres of land they had nurtured and protected. In the distance, they could see their grandchildren playing near the barn, their laughter carrying on the wind. "We did good," Zachary said. "Built something lasting. We did, and it all started with you settling a debt you did not owe and asking nothing in return." "I got everything in return, more than I could have imagined." He squeezed her hand. "No regrets, Rebecca, not a single one." "No regrets," she echoed, "only gratitude." As the last light faded from the sky, they remained on the porch, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life of love and meaning. The ranch would outlast them, passed down through generations who would never fully understand the sacrifice and devotion that had preserved it. But Rebecca and Zachary knew, and that was enough. Years continued to unfold in gentle succession. Zachary's hair turned completely white, while Rebecca's remained stubbornly more salt than pepper. They celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by family, their children and grandchildren filling every room of the house. Thomas had become a respected lawyer in Carson City, while Caroline and her husband ran a successful ranch that bordered their own. The grandchildren were growing, some already starting families of their own. 40 years, Rebecca marveled as they prepared for bed that night, the house finally quiet after the celebration. "It seems impossible. Feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time." Zachary sat on the edge of the bed, his movements slower than they once were. His back troubled him some days, legacy of decades of hard ranch work. "Though I suppose that's how time works. It slips past when you are not paying attention. We paid attention. Every moment mattered. You are feeling philosophical tonight. She smiled and sat beside him. I am feeling grateful. Grateful we found each other, grateful for the life we built, grateful for every day I get to wake up next to you. He kissed her, soft and sweet. The feeling is mutual, Mrs. Holbrook. They lay down together, fitting together in the way couples do after decades of sharing a bed. Rebecca listened to Zachary's breathing slow and deepen as he drifted off to sleep. She remained awake longer, her mind wandering through memories. Thomas, her first husband, was a distant figure now, someone she had known in another life. Sometimes she felt guilty about how little she thought of him, but the truth was that her real life had started when Zachary rode onto her property with his pack mule and quiet kindness. The next few years brought both joy and sorrow. Caroline had another child, a boy they named Zachary in honor of his grandfather. Thomas's eldest daughter married a banker from San Francisco and moved to the city. The ranch faced a particularly difficult winter where they lost several animals, but they weathered it as they had weathered every challenge together. Then one morning in late spring, Rebecca woke to find Zachary had not risen with the sun as was his habit. She touched his shoulder, meaning to tease him about sleeping late, and found him still and cold. The doctor said it was his heart, that he had gone peacefully in his sleep, feeling no pain. Rebecca supposed that should have been a comfort, but in that moment, nothing could comfort the gaping wound his absence created. The funeral was large, attended by seemingly everyone in the county. Zachary had become a respected figure in the community, known for his fairness and generosity. Person after person approached Rebecca to share stories of how Zachary had helped them, shown them kindness, made a difference in their lives. She listened with numb politeness, wishing they would all leave so she could grieve in private. In the weeks that followed, she moved through her days in a fog. Thomas and Caroline were endlessly patient, taking over the running of the ranch, managing the details she could not bear to face. The grandchildren tiptoed around her as if she might break. Perhaps she had already broken. She could not tell. One morning, she found herself standing at Zachary's grave, located not far from where her first husband lay. She had not consciously decided to come here, had just found her feet carrying her up the hill. The headstone was simple granite, carved with his name and the dates of his life, and beneath, the words beloved husband, father, and friend. I do not know how to do this without you, she said aloud. Her voice sounded strange in the quiet morning air. 42 years we had, and it was not nearly enough. I thought I knew what it was like to be a widow, but I was wrong. Losing Thomas was sad, but losing you is like losing part of my soul. The wind rustled through the cottonwood tree, but Zachary did not answer. He never would again. You told me once that you believed in me, that you knew I was strong enough to save myself. I hope you were right, because I am going to need that strength now. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I love you. I will always love you. Thank you for every day, every moment. Thank you for saving me all those years ago. Thank you for being exactly who you were. She stood there for a long time, letting herself cry, letting herself feel the full weight of her loss. Eventually, she wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Zachary would not want her to give up, to stop living just because he was gone. He had taught her about resilience, about facing challenges head-on, about choosing joy even in difficult times. I will be all right, she told herself. It will hurt for a long time, maybe forever. But I will be all right. She walked back down the hill to the house where her family waited. Thomas looked up anxiously when she entered. Mother, are you all right? I am, and she meant it. She was not fine, would not be fine for a long time, but she would be all right. Let's go over the accounts. I want to understand where we stand with the herd. Life continued. Rebecca threw herself into the ranch work with renewed focus. It gave her purpose, kept her busy, honored the legacy she and Zachary had built together. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing on stories of their grandfather, making sure they understood the kind of man he had been. She also spent time alone, which others worried about but which she needed. Alone, she could talk to Zachary, tell him about her day, share her thoughts as she always had. Some might call it madness, talking to someone who was not there, but it brought her comfort. On what would have been their 45th anniversary, she rode out to his grave with a blanket and a picnic lunch. She spread the blanket on the grass and set out food for two, even though she would eat alone. "Happy anniversary," she said. "I made your favorite, roast beef sandwiches and apple pie. Remember when I burned the pie on our first anniversary? You ate it anyway, said it was delicious even though we both knew it tasted like charcoal." She talked to him throughout the meal, reminiscing about their years together, their adventures and challenges and quiet moments. When she finished eating, she lay back on the blanket and looked up at the sky, clouds drifting past in lazy patterns. "I am 73 years old," she said. "Sometimes I feel every year and sometimes I feel young again, like I did when we first met. You made me feel young, Zachary. You made me feel alive." A shadow fell across her, and she opened her eyes to find Caroline standing nearby. Her daughter's face was concerned. "Mother, Thomas said you rode out this morning and did not come back. I am having a picnic with your father. Would you like to join us?" Caroline's expression softened. She sat on the blanket beside Rebecca. "I miss him too, every day." "I know you do, sweetheart. He loved you so much, loved all of you." "Tell me a story about him. Something I do not know." Rebecca thought for a moment. "Did I ever tell you about the time he won me at a poker game?" Caroline laughed. "That is not possible. Father would never gamble with you as stakes." "Not literally, though the way he tells it, you would think so. We had been married about 5 years and I wanted to go to San Francisco. But he kept putting it off, saying we could not afford it, the ranch needed too much work, the timing was bad. So I challenged him to a poker game. If I won, we took the trip. If he won, I stopped nagging him about it. Who won? He did. He was a much better poker player than I ever was. But the next morning he told me to pack my bags because we were going to San Francisco anyway. Said he won the right to make me happy and the trip would make me happy, so that was that." Caroline smiled, tears in her eyes. "That sounds like him. He was a good man, the best man I ever knew." They sat together for a while longer, mother and daughter, sharing memories and grief. Eventually they packed up the picnic and rode back to the ranch together. It helped, Rebecca thought, having people who understood, who had loved Zachary as she did. More time passed. Rebecca's own health began to decline. Nothing dramatic, but a slow wearing down that came with age. She moved more slowly, tired more easily, forgot small details. Thomas wanted her to move to town to live with him where he could keep an eye on her, but she refused. "I will stay on this ranch as long as I draw breath," she told him firmly. "Your father and I built this place together, and I will not abandon it now." "I am not asking you to abandon it, just to be practical. What if you fall and no one is around? What if you need help? Then I will handle it as I have handled every other challenge in my life, with grace and grit." Thomas gave up arguing, though he insisted on hiring a woman from town to come check on her daily. Rebecca tolerated it because she understood her son's concern, even if she found it unnecessary. On a clear autumn morning, Rebecca woke feeling lighter than she had in years. She rose and dressed, moving with surprising ease. She made breakfast and ate on the porch, watching the sun climb over the mountains. The ranch spread out before her, peaceful and beautiful, exactly as she and Zachary had dreamed it would be. After breakfast, she walked up the hill to the graves. She had not been there in several weeks, the walk having become too difficult. But today her legs felt strong, her breathing easy. She knelt between the two graves, Thomas on her left, Zachary on her right. "I think I will be joining you soon, my love," she told Zachary. She felt no fear at the thought, only anticipation. "I am tired and I miss you. I have lived a good long life, longer than I ever expected, but I am ready now, ready to rest." She lay down on the grass between the graves, the morning sun warm on her face. She closed her eyes and thought about everything she had experienced, all the love and loss and joy and sorrow. She thought about Thomas, young and optimistic and flawed. She thought about Zachary, riding onto her property that fateful day and changing everything. She thought about her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the legacy she and Zachary had created. "Thank you," she whispered. She was not sure who she was thanking, God or fate or Zachary or all of them together. "Thank you for everything." The woman from town found her late that afternoon, lying peacefully on the hill between the two men she had married. The doctor confirmed what everyone already knew. She had passed quietly, a smile on her face, her heart simply choosing to stop. She was 76 years old and had lived every one of those years fully. The funeral was even larger than Zachary's had been. 4 generations of family attended, along with friends and neighbors and business associates. They buried her between Thomas and Zachary, though everyone knew which marriage had defined her life. The headstone matched Zachary's, simple granite carved with her name and dates, and beneath, "Beloved wife, mother, and friend." At the reception afterward, Caroline found her brother standing alone, staring out at the ranch. "Are you all right?" she asked. "I keep thinking about the story," Thomas said. "About father paying off mother's debt when he barely knew her. Can you imagine? $1,400 to a stranger." Not a stranger. The widow of someone who had helped him. Still, it was an extraordinary thing to do, it was, but father was an extraordinary man. Caroline slipped her arm through her brother's. And mother was extraordinary too. They were lucky to find each other. "Do you think we ever really knew them? Their whole story?" "I do not think any child fully knows their parents, but we knew the important parts. We knew they loved each other deeply. We knew they built something lasting. That's enough." Thomas nodded. Together, they looked out at the ranch, thriving and beautiful, a testament to love and sacrifice and 2 people who had chosen each other against all odds. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. The same sky Rebecca and Zachary had watched together for over 40 years. In the end, it was a story of debts paid and love found, of second chances and new beginnings. It was a story of the frontier and the people who built their lives there, ordinary individuals who did extraordinary things. Most of all, it was a love story, the kind that lasted beyond death, living on in the land and the family and the memories of everyone they touched. The ranch continued for generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But at the heart of it all was a simple truth. A cowboy had settled a debt he did not owe, asked nothing in return, and found a love that transformed both their lives. It was more than enough. It was everything.